Hello and welcome to Nature Photography During Lockdown Part 5. We're locked in. We're taking photos of things that we've brought inside from nature or things that we already had inside the home that remind us of nature, and we're trying to make the photos look like they were taken outside. It's nature photography. We're faking it. In this episode, I'm going to be editing the photos from the previous 2 episodes. Okay, that was the idea. I was going to put both edits into the one video, but it was going to be a really, really long one. And I don't want you hanging around too long. I want you going off and watching more of my videos. So in this episode, I'm only going to edit the ice footage. So enjoy and don't go away. Alright, here we are in Lightroom. First of all, we're going to start this in Lightroom and then move it across to Photoshop. So what we're basically doing here is turning this image into this. So you can see that this one here's got a lot more depth in the shadows, and it's just a lot more 3D than this one. This one's kind of flat and lifeless. So you can see here on the left hand side the edits that I have done here in Lightroom before. But I will reset this and we'll start them again because I want this to be a fresh edit so that you can follow me through. And then this is the one from Photoshop, and I've burnt the shadows a little bit to make them a little bit deeper, give it more of that 3D look. So let's get started. We'll go back to our raw file. I really have to move the placement of this microphone. It gets in the way of things. Okay, we're going to reset this and start from scratch. Now you can see this is not a bad photo to start off with. I mean, there's really nothing wrong with it, but it can look better. So what we're going to do is come over here and we're going to look at a few of our settings here just in the basic panel. This is pretty much all I use in Lightroom. I will do the basic panel. Maybe occasionally I will use HSL or color, or I'll use tone curve very, very rarely, and maybe a little bit of the detail slider. But I do like to do most of my sharpening and my noise reduction inside of Photoshop because it's just much more powerful. I do use lens corrections. I apply these on import. So I've done a video about that in the past and it's linked up over this side, I believe. So go and have a look at that one if you want to, but I won't go through this today. But this just removes your lens distortion and your chromatic aberration, which is chromatic aberration is the coloration you get on the edges of things when you have highlights, for example. So if you looked here, you would have, sorry, that was the wrong key I pressed there. You would have like a purplish or magenta shade around the edges, or maybe yellow or green. That is chromatic aberration. It's just caused by lenses do it naturally. A lot of lenses do it. A lot of cheaper lenses do it quite badly. Some lenses don't do it much at all. It's just a natural thing in photography, basically, because of the refraction of the light through the lens. So, all right, now let's go back to our basic panel here, opening it up, and the profile I never really mess with generally. I'm going to leave it on Adobe Color for today. Sometimes I will go in and I will just choose browse now, and I will just do it the standard from my camera, or scroll through and see what, I mean, looking at that one there, the landscape setting, that's almost pretty much exactly what we're going to end up with. So I could do this in one click if I wanted to. I mean, look at that, that's quite beautiful, but we won't do that. We will actually touch some sliders and do some things. So we'll leave it on Adobe Color. The temperature is fine, the tint is fine, I'm not going to change those. The exposure looks okay. We may just raise it up just a little bit, just to push our histogram more towards the middle of the thing up here. Make sure you watch your histogram all the time. This will tell you if you are blowing out your highlights or your shadows. So you need to watch this. If the graph here is heading up the sides at all, that means you're overexposing your highlights over here. If you've got the graph moving up the side of this on the left hand side, that means your shadows are clipping, so you do not want that. So we've got to try and keep it nicely in between. It doesn't have to be in the middle like this. Every image is going to look different. If it's a darker image, it'll be more pushed over to the left hand side here. If it's a brighter image, it'll be more over to the right hand side. So the contrast, we might just add a little bit of contrast just to make those shadows pop a little bit more. The highlights appear to be clipping just a little bit, so we'll drop them back. You can see this little highlight clipping arrow up here. So if I undo that last step, you can see it's lit up there, but then if I go back again and drop those, or did I did not, I undid my contrast. So we'll take our highlights down, the little arrow turns off. So that tells us that our highlights are not clipping. The shadows are looking pretty good, but I might darken them just a little bit, just give this photo a bit more mood. There, the whites, what I do with the whites is hold Alt and or Option on a Mac, and then left click on your mouse, hold it and drag it down. If you can see the little spots, that means that is areas of your whites that are clipping, so we don't want that. We want to dial it back until you see no spots on your screen. So there we go, there at 89, it looks like minus 89. Whoop, there we go, no, minus 90 will be good, 91 around there somewhere. Okay, so that's good. And then the same with the blacks, holding Alt or Option, left click and hold and drag it down until you see a tiny bit of black coming in there. You want to watch your navigator. You want to watch your navigator up here just to make sure that it's not going to look silly while you're doing that. You can see as you do it, you can see the results up there in the navigator window, so you want to watch that so that it doesn't look ugly. So that minus 19 is pretty good. Whenever you want to see the original image, just hit the backslash key. That will show you the before and after, before, after. So we're just making, a tiny amount of difference to this image at the moment. Now the other thing that I tend to do these days in Lightroom is, because I'm using the version of Lightroom that is, what is my version? It's the 9.0 release. So this is like a newer version of Lightroom, and you have this texture slider here, which I love. I love this texture slider. What this does is it's basically, it looks to me like it gives everything more texture. It's playing around with the contrast a little bit by the looks of it. It's sort of almost got sharpening involved there too. I'm really not sure what it's doing. I'm sorry, I haven't really looked into that yet, but it does have a great effect on an image like this. I'm just going to zoom in. So to zoom in, you just left click on your mouse and then you can press and hold to drag around. Left click and hold to drag around your image. So we can see the effects better of the texture slider here. So if I crank it way up, you can see it's really defining the edges of things, and it's just bringing the image to life, really. It's really quite good, but you don't want to overdo it. So let's just drop it back. That is too much. I'm going to leave it at about 24. 24 is good. If you want to see the results of the last thing you just did, just go over here to your history here and just clip back before we added texture, and you can see the result of that. There's after the texture, before it, after it. See, it just made it, so fantastic. It's a really good difference to that. So now, clarity, I find no, I don't generally like clarity much. If you overuse it, it looks unnatural and quite yuck. So maybe a little bit on this one. We'll go 10 on there. Have a look before and after the clarity. That's fine, we'll leave it at 10. Dehaze I won't touch here because we don't need it. Vibrance, no. Saturation, no, because we don't have much color in this image anyway. That is all I'm going to do with this in Lightroom. So now what I do is I right click on the image itself, go down to Edit In and click Edit in Photoshop, and we'll do a little bit extra to this picture in Photoshop. Here we are in Photoshop. I have my image open. What is the first thing we do? Always we make a copy of our background layer. So you can do this in a number of ways. You can either left click and hold, drag that layer down to the little plus symbol down the bottom, let go, and that will create a duplicate of your background layer. Control or Command Z to undo that. You can also press Control or Command J, and that will duplicate your background layer. The reason we want to duplicate our background layer is because we don't want to be doing edits to the original image, and it's also so that we can see before and afters really quick by turning off the layers above our background or original image. So what I'm going to do in here is simply noise reduction and sharpening, and we're going to do a bit of burning into the shadows and perhaps a bit of dodging on the highlights as well to make it a bit more 3D. So I've duplicated my layer. The first thing I'm going to do is noise reduction. Now we come up here to filter, left click on that, all the way down to the bottom here. Now I'm using a plugin for Photoshop called Topaz Denoise 6. This is an older version of Topaz Denoise. They now have Topaz Denoise AI, which is a fantastic, amazing. I used the trial version for a little while, and I am going to be purchasing the full version myself. It's an amazing program. Does noise reduction on high ISO images. Just sweet. So there's a link to that in the video description if you want to grab that for yourself, but I'm using Denoise 6. So we'll open Denoise 6 and we will check a place here with some shadows in it. Actually, scrolling around here, I noticed there are some, I just noticed something, there was a bit of yellow in there, like there was something in the ice. I can just zoom out here to 100%. I thought I saw something. Anyway, I'll go back to 200% and I will perform this noise reduction. I want to find a spot here where there's some shadow. Noise shows up in your shadows generally more than your highlights, so we'll just look there. It's not a very noisy image, so I'm just going to dial up the strength to about 7 before, after, maybe a little bit more. Whoa, not 12, no, because the more you do noise reduction, of course, the more you lose detail, so you have to be careful with it. I think that's going to be fine. I'm not going to use any of these other sliders because they're just not necessary for this image, and I'm just going to click OK, and that will process it, and then we'll go back to Photoshop. Alright, our noise reduction is done and we are back. Now if I zoom in to 150% there, we'll look at the before and after. There's the before, there's the after. You can see we have lost a little bit of detail, but if you're not viewing it at 150%, you would not notice. So now what I'm going to do is duplicate this layer by left clicking, dragging it down to the bottom, let go, and we get another copy. I'm going to call this one Sharpen just so I know what I'm doing here. Back to filter, and we're going to come down to sharpen, across and down to the bottom to Unsharp Mask. This is the main thing that I use to do my sharpening in Photoshop. Occasionally I will use Smart Sharpen, but it's only for certain things. I never use these ones here. I haven't really used shake reduction. I've used sharpen, but it doesn't, that just does an automatic sharpening for you and it's not very strong. You can't really see the difference. Sharpen edges I've never used, and sharpen more I have not used. So today we're going to use Unsharp Mask. Now you want to zoom in, so you can press Control or Command plus to zoom in and have a look here, and you can turn your preview on and off here. This will turn off the effect in the main window there, so you can see that's making quite a nice difference already, but we'll dial it up to about 100 and see what happens. Before, after, that's kind of nice. If I dial it way up and show you what too much sharpening looks like. Now this is too much. Obviously it looks ridiculous. You do not want to do this to your images, so please do not over sharpen. You want it to be subtle. Like 130 is probably still overdoing it. Things up here, the edges up here just look too sharp. So I'm going to bring it back to around 100. That'll do 100, 101, click OK. That's process that we have before the sharpening, after the sharpening, looking pretty good. Control or Command 0 to go back to 100%. Now we'll get to the dodging and burning and make these shadows a little bit darker and make the highlights a bit more prominent and just give it that nice 3D look. Okay, so now we're going to do a little bit of dodge and burn. If you don't know what dodging and burning is, basically it's playing with the exposure in just certain parts of your image. Dodging is where you are brightening certain parts of the image. Burning is where you're obviously darkening it. Now, this particular dodge and burn technique I have learnt from Unmesh. I'm sorry, Unmesh, if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. Over at Pix Imperfect on YouTube, I suggest you check out his videos. I've put a link to his channel in the description. He does some really amazing stuff. He's a Photoshop whiz, and I have learnt quite a lot from this man. So this is one of his techniques. The first thing that we do is press Control or Command, Shift and N to create a new layer. Now we can call this layer burn. I'm going to burn first of all. Don't touch any of that. Don't touch this. The mode we do want to touch, we want to change the mode to overlay and then fill with overlay neutral color 50% gray. So check that box and click OK. So now we have a 50% gray layer and we can't see it because it's 50% gray, okay? Let's not go into why right now, but on this layer we can now paint with our brush in black. So we will go over here to our foreground and background colors, click that little arrow there, and that will change our foreground color to black. You can also press X on your keyboard to toggle between foreground and background colors. Now, because we're going to paint with black, this is going to mean that we're going to darken things. So we go to our brush over here. Now our brush settings, make sure your brush is, the hardness is 0% and the size is up to you. It depends on where you're painting, of course. Up the top here, we're going to leave our opacity at 100% and we're going to turn our flow to maybe about 10-ish. 10 will be good. Now, to change the size of your brush or the hardness of your brush, you can hold Alt or Option, right click and hold your mouse and slide it to the right to make your brush bigger, to the left to make it smaller, down to make your brush harder, up to make your brush softer. Now, we're just going to paint on this layer just in the areas where we want things to be a little bit darker. So let's just go in there. Don't be concerned if the effect is too strong right now, because we can always change the opacity of the layer and bring it back. So you can see I'm just sort of randomly finding darker parts of the ice and we're going to just darken them down. And it's going to give it that extra dimensional kind of look here. So a bit around in there, maybe go in there a little, maybe in this bit here, make it a bit bigger, just dabbing it there, just clicking, left clicking. A bit up in there, bit up in there, maybe some here and this bit there. If you can't remember where you've drawn, just turn the layer off just by clicking the little eyeball there. So before, after, see that's probably a bit overdone, that effect. I think that's enough. I might just paint up in the corner here a little bit too. Okay, so I think it's a little bit overdone, so I'm going to change the opacity of my layer here. So just click and left click on the word opacity and hold it and drag to the left to soften that effect a bit. We'll just come down to 50%, turn it off, turn it on. I still think it's a bit overdone. I might come down to about 40%. I don't mind that. I think that's pretty good. Now we're going to do our dodge layer. So Control or Command Shift N for a new layer. Call it dodge. Change our blending mode to overlay. fill with neutral color 50% gray and click OK. This time we want to draw with white so that we brighten things up. Now, it is sometimes a good idea to have your background color set to 50% gray when you do this, just in case you need to brush out mistakes that you've made. So in order to do that, you can click on your background swatch there. Down in the box here, you've got your color code. What you want to type in there is 808080. That is the code for 50% gray, and click OK. So now we have our foreground color is white, our background color is 50% gray. So we can paint back in any mistakes that we might make here. So leaving our brush settings exactly the same, what I'm going to do is just look for bright areas of the image and just paint around them. So you just sort of, it's like you know, painting with a pen. You're just trying to accentuate the highlights and bring out the areas where the light is coming from, make the direction of the light a bit more obvious, if you like. Don't think I like that I just did there, but that's fine. Up here we've got some brighter areas. There's a bit there, a little bit there. This edge here, maybe a little bit there, a little bit there. Did I do that bit up the top? Yes, I have. There's some in here that might do be with a little bit of dodging. Maybe in there. And this bit in here as well, we'll just round in there a little bit. And I think that will do for now. So you can see the before and the after. Obviously it's too strong. So again, up here to our opacity layer, left click and hold, we'll drag it back to about 50% as we did with the burning layer, and see what that's like. That's just too strong at 50%. We'll come back to 23%. That's very subtle and I like that. What you can do now to see the image without the effect of these two layers on it is just control click on both of these layers. So that's control and left click, or command and left click, and then right click your mouse and click on group from layers. So this will create a group. You can call this D and B for dodge and burn if you like. Dodge and burn, and click OK. Now we can turn them off together and see the before and after, before and after. And you can also change the opacity of both of those as a group now, so that if it's still too strong, you can sort of back off that. But I'm not really going to. I think the burning layer is probably a little bit too intense, but it's okay. And that's pretty much where we're going to leave the edit for this one. So what I do now is I right click on the background layer and I come down to flatten image. What this does is it blends all of the layers together into one entire layer, and then I just come up here to the X on the tab here of this document, and you click that and it says save changes to Adobe Photoshop document, blah blah blah, before closing, and you just click yes. And what that does is it will send it back into Lightroom as a TIFF file. So if we go back to Lightroom here, we've got, there's our file that we have edited, and so here's our, that's the other one that was done before. So it looks a little bit different to the one that I did last time, but you know, it's still nice. So I'll just full screen that, and that looks pretty good to me. I like that. I'm happy with that result. So that is one way of editing the ice photos that we took indoors in nature photography during lockdown. Now, hopefully you can get the same results if you followed the instructions, or if you followed along with me in that ice video that I did. If you haven't seen it, I've linked it up here. If you follow along with that, you should be able to get similar results, and using the techniques I just showed you in this video, you should be able to make it look a little bit like that. Nature photography during lockdown will be back next week, where I will edit the water droplet photos, so don't miss that. In order to make sure you do not miss it, click subscribe, ding the notification bell so that you'll get notified when that video comes out. Until next time, I'm Barry Callister, Photographer's Freedom. Get out there, take some wicked shots. I'll see you soon.